welcome to our first video in our Locomotive build series. This is going to be a full build series from start to finish, the start model I'm starting with all the way through weathering, all the lighting stuff, everything I do from the very beginning, start of a model, to the end to build a model that I want to build here. So to start with this one, we're actually going to be doing a specific number here. This is going to be Conrail 8204. This was a locomotive that operated here in the Northeast Ohio area. Seemed to stay around here quite a bit, and this is actually a shot from 1999 of it. At that time, it was still an original factory EMD paint, so it looked pretty rough. That's kind of part of the reason I wanted to do it. Most of what I remember from back then was all locomotives that looked like this, that were covered in more rust than paint, it seemed, but that seemed just to be the way it was around here, and it kind of made me want to pick this one to build here. So, for our build here, this is a later phase GP38-2. It's got the anti-climber on the front. I got the later style vents. The earlier ones had those like chicken wire style. It's got the smaller fuel tank. Just the basic stuff, 88-inch nose, that kind of deal. So with that all said, our model we'll be starting with here is an Atlas Trainman GP38-2. This is kind of the basic cheapo model. Pretty sure I paid around $40 or so for this one. You can pick them up pretty cheap if you keep your eyes peeled for them. So that was kind of, I want to do a lot of detailing on this and kind of show how to do all that stuff. How to add Cannon and Company fans, doing all the plows, ditch lights, because this will have full lighting like all of my models generally do. The LED front and rear lights, the separate number boards, the marker lights, and then front and rear flashing ditch lights as well. So there's going to be quite a bit of lighting in this one. I want to show how I do all that as part of this video. So with our model out here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started on this. Pretty simple. One of the first things I like to do on a build like this, because I'm going to be disassembling the model anyway, is generally I pop the handrails off. So just kind of carefully just kind of start pulling them out. These Trainman ones are a little bit thick. They don't look the greatest, but they're really easy to take off, which is kind of nice. So you just kind of very carefully start popping them off. This way we don't have to worry about damaging them while we're doing any of our main work. We'll put them back on before we start doing any painting and weathering, obviously. But at least for this first part where we're doing a lot of work on the shell, I'll take them off and I'll put them back here in our box back here. I always like to have a box. That way I could put all my parts in there as I take things off, or as well as when I'm getting parts to build a model, I can put them all in there so that way I can keep everything straight and I know what I have and what I need to get still for the model. So that way when I want to start on a project like this, I got everything ready to go. So you see these come off very easily. Like the Masterline Atlas and Athearns and all those, they can be a little bit more delicate, and you gotta watch because they'll snap the little end off in the side of the car body, which is never good. And you gotta glue them on, that's never fun. Now, get this front handrail off. We're just gonna take and we're gonna pop this plow off because this is gonna be junk anyway. This plastic, whatever the heck plow, no good. Not gonna be good for what we're doing, but we'll throw it in the box for now. These front stanchions were already a little bit broken there in the middle. Might have to, oh no, they're not broken in the anti-climber, so. Alright, we got that off. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to pull out these screws here. There's one right in there that's holding that coupler box, and there's another one that's holding that one there. So we're going to grab our screwdriver here, and we'll go ahead and we'll take those out, get the couplers out of here. Once we get these out, we'll be able to remove the body, so I'll get us along to our next part of our build. Let's see. Now these Atlas plastic couplers I'm not a big fan of either. We'll be putting KDs on when we're done, so just take those and throw them off to the side. And then these coupler boxes, I like to always keep, whenever you buy, you know, speakers or any small parts, a lot of times you get these bags. I always keep them because when you're doing a build like this and you're doing a lot of disassembling, it's kind of nice to be able to throw separate things into separate bags and kind of keep everything where you can find it easy. That way when you go put it back together, you're not trying to figure out what screw came from where and all that kind of jazz when you're you can't remember what in the world you did. So go ahead and get this one put away in our bag. Now in theory here, our shells should come off pretty easy. Sometimes you got to kind of work them a little bit because they do clip in here. I believe they do anyway. This one's not going to want to come off. You got to be a little rough but a little careful because you don't want to crack the body, but at the same time you got to work it free. So now have our body off. We'll get to that here in a minute. We're going to start off with doing a little work here in the motor and drive area. First thing I'm going to do is this fuel tank's got to go because we're actually going to be using the correct fuel tank for this model, which is a smaller one. So we went ahead and we'll pull off this wrong one here first and set that off to the side. I want to get the other one painted before I install it on here. So first thing I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to pull these weights off. Now I know some people are going to be a little bit put off by this, but I don't actually run any of these factory weights in any of my models. I generally take them out on these Atlas units just because it helps to make a lot more space for doing all the lighting and all the wiring. And on my railroad, I don't really run any extreme trains. You know, I run a 40-car train, but generally there'll be 2 or 3 units on it. So it doesn't really hurt anything to have locomotives be a little bit on the lighter side. And honestly, it kind of makes things a little bit more prototypical because you're not going to be pulling a 100-car train with one unit. I mean, that doesn't happen. Now, you could, if you wanted to, take these weights and shave them down. You know, you if you had the access to like a milling machine or something, you could mill it down to like that line and reuse them. But for me, the only thing I have access to is a Dremel, and the couple of times I've done this, it's a long drag to take and mill these down. It's just not worth it. So what we'll end up doing later is we'll come back and we'll cut some pieces of styrene, and we'll basically make a little bench in here to put our speaker on top of. That way we'll have a place to put that. We'll be using a TCS WOW board in here, so we won't have to worry about putting a keep alive anywhere, but that'll kind of do that. So next thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to take and put the weights in my weight drawer, so they're out of the way. We're going to go ahead and we're going to start unhooking wires. And normally some of these can be a bit of a pain in the rear end. I'm not really worried about breaking the end of the wire or anything because we'll probably shorten them down a little bit before we reinstall them later, because I mean they're pretty long and we don't need all that wire. So really here I'm only worried about getting the truck wires off. I'll leave the lights mounted on this board because I don't want the lights anyhow, so we'll just go ahead and do that there. Pop this front one off. There we go. And things like these screws from the weights, these you pretty much just put away with if you have any excess screws somewhere. You're not going to need them again for the rebuild later. Because again, we won't be putting those back in, we'll just be leaving them out. This one's going to play hard here. Oh, there it goes. Alright. Then we just have these two here for the motor. One of these days I'm actually going to remember to write down which one's which, but you know, a lot of times you just, you know, you always say you're going to do that and you never do. So we'll you know, actually I'm going to have video evidence here, so I'll be able to look at that and remember which one's which, but I won't think of that when I'm reassembling it. It never happens. Alright, there we go. Alright, so all of our wires are unclipped now, at least. Some of them might, there we go. That one's out, that one's out. Now to get this board off, you just kind of take and push inward on the clip and it'll pop through, and then the top one will pop back out. Go ahead and pull that off. Now these, I don't really have any use for them. There's kind of your little DCC ready board. You can throw it out, you can hold on to them, sell them. I'll probably hold on to this one, try and get a couple bucks out of it and see if I do. Not going to hold my breath, I will, but you know, we'll hold on to it and see what happens there. Alright, so now we're almost down to our bare frame here. So what we're going to go ahead and do is, I want to take some more of this body apart before we dive any farther into the frame. The one thing about the body, I want to get the cab off of this because we're going to be removing the numbers from this cab to renumber it. I also want to pull the lighting parts out as well while we're at it. So what we're going to do here, I'm going to take a chisel blade here, and I want to kind of get in. There's a seam right at the bottom of the cab, and you just kind of want to get in there and just kind of very gently pry and kind of get one side up, and then you'll want to come over into the other side and try to get that blade in there ever so slightly. You want to be kind of careful because you don't want to chip the paint, especially if it's a model you're not going to repaint. Now, obviously, this one, with it ending up being as weathered as it's going to be, it's not going to have to be perfectly matched paint if something did scrape, but you still want to be a little bit careful. So here we have the basic shell here. I got to knock that number board out there, so go ahead and we'll just kind of take and see if we can't push that loose. Obviously, if you're going to keep the number of the unit, you're going to want to be kind of careful with these number boards when you're pushed on them, but generally you just push a little bit on each side and it'll fall right out like that one did. So we're going to take that and we're going to put it in our bag, so I need that. I'll throw out these little clips here too while we're at it, because I don't really need these sitting around. So now we got that all apart there. Let's go ahead and let's pull our one out from the front end of the unit here. Oh, that one just fell right out, so that one was in there goodly. Let's take that and put it in our bag. So now we got our parts sitting around separate. Now, this horn, this is pretty much no good to me. I don't need this, so we're just going to pop that off. Throw it in our file away bin, wherever the heck that went, over here. Alright, so one of the other things I want to do on this unit is I want to have the front cab door open. So knowing that, I need to get this cab glass out, which can, sometimes it could be easy, sometimes it's a pain in the rear end. Generally, what I go into with that is I just kind of come in, I get up under the edges of it and just start trying to pop it all loose. If you try to get it from the outside, you're going to end up scratching the fake glass in here, so generally you just want to get it from the inside and try and get up underneath one of these little lips here and just pop her free. There we go. Now it's starting to come out. Get up here in this top part. Alright, we're still hooked right here. Hopefully this is all showing up on the camera halfway decent. It's kind of hard to tell. I'm paying more attention around the camera than looking in it, so hopefully this will turn out decent for you guys and y'all enjoy it. Maybe you learn something, maybe you don't. We'll see what happens. If y'all enjoy this, make sure you like it. Make sure you're subscribed if you're not. Leave me a comment. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. I don't care, let me know, guys. Maybe you guys know a better way than I do. Feel free to, let me in on that there, and I'll definitely look into anything. I always take suggestions, Some people have better ways of doing things, and you never know unless somebody tells you them, so. Alright, now we got our front window glass. This should just pop out, in theory. Yeah, there we go. So we're removing that because when we go to take our door out here, we're gonna be, this front glass is all one piece, so we're gonna have to cut the one window off and put it on the door and all that fun jazz. So with all that done, we can go ahead and we can put our cab in our box there, and we'll take our window glass. I'm gonna put that in with our number boards here, just to keep things somewhat neat. Forgot to mention here, this is a piece that goes on the underside, like on the bottom of the cab here, to pretty much to keep your number board light from bleeding through. If you want to keep that and reinstall it, you can. I generally don't. When I do the reinstall and the lighting, I generally come in with electrical tape. Maybe I will keep this one. We'll keep that. We'll see how that goes when we go put it in later. But that's the basics of getting our cab ready. The next thing we're going to have to do with our cab and body areas, I'm going to come in, I'm going to start drumming out these holes for our Canon & Company fans here. Still have a few of these stashed around, so we'll be putting these on this model. But that will be in our next video. This one's more of a disassembly and look at everything. So the last thing we have to disassemble here is our actual model itself here. Boy, it looks like that. Oh, a little bit of shaving in there. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and we're going to take our trucks off. We're actually going to take them apart. We're going to have some real fun here. So by doing what we do here is these clips back here that hold our worm gear in, just take and pull outward and up, and you'll pop one side free. You do the same thing with the other side. A lot of times it'll pop right off of there. So we now have that apart. Now with that apart, what we're going to do is we're just going to lift on the front of this worm gear here. Just lift it up very carefully and kind of set it off to the side. and we'll take and we'll jiggle our truck free. Do the same thing with the front one. Just pick it up, lift it off, and set it down. And now we have our two truck assemblies right here in front of us. Now this is one of those areas where I kind of like to go a little bit above and beyond here. I like to take, and there's a clip on there that's holding that wire onto the pickup for the power pickup from the wheels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these side frames off because I want to paint the sides of the wheels so that way we're ahead of the game for weathering. But while I have it off, I want to go ahead and take this clip off and I want to solder up that wire so that way I know for sure I'm getting a good electrical contact there. So to get that apart, what we want to do is let me see if I can get that to come up. There's a clip right here, and then there's one right here that we need to pop up that we could get to get the frame to come apart. Now the easiest way I've found to do this is to take a knife. Generally, I like to use a dull one for this type of stuff. What I generally have here, I always keep two. Keep one with a good handle for doing decals and all that type of stuff, and that always gets my sharp blade. When it starts to get a little bit dull, I'll throw it on this cheesy older style knife here. And I'll use that for things like this where I got to pop up on something, but I don't want to cut it. Now, this is where it could be a bit tricky. These can, sometimes they could come right out, and sometimes they'll fight you a little bit. This one's going to come apart good. Now you get that little clip in there worked up. There you can see it. You get that worked up, and you come down here, and you just kind of get in this end and just kind of pull up on it a little bit. Now that's going to get that side of the frame loose right there. So now we need to come over to this opposite end here. Do the same thing. I want to get that clip pulled up. Like so. Get in the end a little bit. And now our truck frame should, yep, there it goes. Comes right apart. Comes right off. And now here's our power pickup right here. This is what actually picks up the power from the wheels and goes onto the car. So, this is that clip I was mentioning earlier that I always like to solder these up just because I don't like clips, you know? I don't know why, I don't like having these things in here. I'd rather have a soldered joint that I know is not going to just fall off, you know, or something's going to get into it and it's going to come apart. So we'll be soldering that. But first I want to get this other side off too. I got this here. Let's go ahead and see if we can I gotta get underneath it. Oop. Now you can actually remove this whole bottom. I've never had a lot of luck with doing that. The other thing about doing this too is if you get a used model, sometimes they're a little bit oily on the bottom from people getting a little happy with the oil. End up wiping all that off before you get done. But the downfall is you get good and oily while you're trying to get this stuff apart here. Or greased or whatever you want to go with there. Alright, so we got the other side apart. Oh, and there go our wheels. That's why I don't like to take that whole clip off the bottom, but sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. We're just gonna go ahead and we're gonna kind of put that back on. I don't want that all the way back on. I just want that part of the way on. Whoop. Well, it's all the way back on. We'll worry about that later. So, now these clips, we gotta get these clips off of here. Again, these are the same kind of clips that were on the circuit board. These ones come off a little bit easier, which is always nice. Or sometimes they don't. Now you want to be kind of careful because you don't want this to get bent. You want it to stay nice and straight. So what you can do is you grab your handy dandy old pliers here and take and just pinch down on the center of that and just barely break it and it'll pop right off of there. So one thing that we can, so we're going to go ahead and we're actually going to solder this here. I wasn't sure how far I was going to go with this first video here and how much I wanted to do here today. What we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and throw a little lead on that old, on those there while we're got this videoing here. And we'll wrap up this first video with that, I believe. We'll get that shot and we'll get there. So while I'm waiting for my iron to warm up, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get a little acrylic paint. This is burnt umber. It's a classic rust brownish kind of look there. I'm putting it back. Take our brush. Alright, so when painting these, You gotta really watch out because you don't want to get anything in this center section, this very center circle, with the pin sticking out of it and then the immediate circle around it, because that's what picks up your track power right there. But everything else on this outer face is all good surface area. You get some paint on here. This will really make a difference in the finished model when you're done with weathering. And then two, this is also a really easy time to do this. If you try to do it later, you gotta paint half the wheel and then go over and put the model on the layout, drive it forward a little bit so you can get to the other half of the wheel, and that always seems to be a pain in the rear end. So with a model like these Atlas models, or even an Athearn Genesis, you can take these truck frames apart pretty simply. They all have that same simple bottom clip deal where you can pop them apart. I generally do that with these just to kind of make life a little bit simpler. And it's just one less thing to have to do later. Now you don't want to get obviously don't want to get any paint on the bottom or the wheels. If you do, it's no big deal. You clean that up later. My advice would be to just let it dry, because if you try to wipe it off, you're just going to wipe it around the wheel more. It's going to be a bigger mess. And it is acrylic paint, so it'll come off with a little rubbing alcohol later on when you're done. And generally, whenever I finish one of these builds, I like to take the rubbing alcohol and clean the wheels off with it anyway. It's kind of a first thing to do. So just get a paint both sides. Nothing crazy here, guys. Just a little paint work. But this, again, is just something that a lot of people don't take the time to do. And this is the kind of one of those things that will really make a big difference in the finished model. Because, when you can weather outside of you can weather a body and all that you want to. You do all the underframe weathering you want, but if you can still see a metal wheel in there that's that's like silverish color instead of the proper color, it ain't going to look too good. It's just not going to look as good as one that somebody took the time to go in there and do it right, And since we're pulling this apart anyway to make sure our joints are good and soldered, you might as well take the minute or two to do this and just get her done. There's one side done. Let's see how hot our iron is here. I don't know if it's really that hot even. Where is our solder? Let's see what we got there. Ooh, we got a little heatage. I'll take it. All right, hopefully this will show up here. So this stuff here, what do we got here? The Kester, ooh. 60% tin, 40% lead. It says to clean surfaces, heat parts, and apply solder to heat parts. Oh, look at that, gives you directions. So, soldering is one of those things, guys. If you haven't done it before, you just gotta kind of, dive into it, and you'll kind of learn the hard way. You're gonna burn your fingers a lot. I'll tell you that right now. You will burn your fingers quite a bit, but you kind of get used to it. These side frames can be a bit tricky because you gotta get the copper hot enough to where it'll take the solder. But normally about the time it starts getting that hot, wherever you're touching to hold it down to keep it standing upright, that's gonna start burning your finger just a little bit. So you kind of want to hold it down and try and get some on there, and then when you start to feel your finger burn, you just do the old out of there, Don't want to get too burnt. There'll be plenty of that later when we start doing the other stuff. Ooh, that's still pretty hot. Now we got a good joint on there. It's on there, it ain't going nowhere. I'll do the same thing with the other side. Now this is kind of why when you're pulling those clips off, you want to try and keep the wire hooked up in there instead of like ripping the whole wire and everything off. You do that, you're gonna be fighting yourself at a later time, Ooh, let's see if we can get this one all heated up now. Oh, no, I ain't wanting to heat up. Oh man, this is probably one of the parts I should edit out because it ain't going right. But nah, I'm gonna leave everything in on this for any of you that watch. Sometimes sometimes you're not as perfect as what people think you are. You just gotta make do, and that's how you learn. Alright, so that's our other ones all done up there. Now, I'm going to want to let that paint dry a little bit before I put all this back together. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go ahead and cut the camera off, and I will do the rear truck, and I'll probably start filming. We'll probably start off with the next one tomorrow. We'll maybe get into some of the next parts of this build either tomorrow or whenever the next day I can record will be. We'll start doing some of the major body work we're going to have to do. We'll go ahead and we'll get those fans all dremeled out, and we'll go ahead and we'll get the door cut on the front of the cab so we can put that on. We'll also take a look and see what else we need to do to this. But overall, our paint job does match our prototype pretty dang closely. Close enough to where I ain't going to repaint the whole dang thing just for, just for fun. But what I will do is I'll probably end up having to match some of that paint. So you get out your handy dandy old, which color is the right color here. Well, looks like true color's close. Not really, but it's kind of hard to tell. But the beauty of doing a really weathered model like this is that it doesn't have to match perfect. You can do a lot of blending with weathering to where people aren't going to notice if your door is a shade too dark or a shade too light. So, hey, you guys, I appreciate everyone that tuned in for this. I hope you tune in for the next one, and we'll keep on diving through this whole project here. Hopefully you guys will enjoy this. If you aren't subscribed, make sure you subscribe, please, please, please. And if you could, please drop me a comment if you have something you want to say. Drop a like, whatever you may have. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for watching.